Imagine looking out your window and seeing an empire that has stood for over 1,000 years just, well, just vanish.
Right, just totally gone.
Yeah, and not because of like a sudden alien invasion or a freak meteor strike, but because the very foundation of the society simply dissolved from the inside out.
It really shatters the illusion we all carry around, doesn't it? I mean, the idea that massive, seemingly permanent structures only fall when some giant external wrecking ball hits them.
Oh, for sure.
We desperately want disasters to be external so we can, point to an enemy and totally absolve ourselves.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking you on a journey into one of the most profound historical mysteries, which is how does the unconquerable Roman Empire suddenly collapse?
Yeah, it's a huge question.
It really is. We are looking at an absolute monument of a text today, Augustine's City of God. And our mission is to unpack his radical thesis.
Which is pretty mind-blowing when you get into it.
Exactly. He basically argues that civilizations do not simply fall to barbarian swords.
Wow.
They decay spiritually, psychologically, and morally long before the political collapse ever makes the headlines.
Right, long before.
So we're zeroing in on the catastrophic sack of Rome in 410 AD. And trust me, we are going to find some deeply unsettling mirrors to our modern societies, our institutions, and, well, the media diets we consume every single day.
To even begin grasping Augustine's argument here, you really have to put yourself in the mindset of someone living in the year 410 AD. You have to feel the sheer, just paralyzing shock of that moment.
Because it wasn't just another city falling.
Not at all. Rome was the organizing principle of the known world. I mean, it had been expanding and dominating for over 11 centuries. And then the Goths, led by a king named Alaric, actually breached the walls.
Why?
They sacked the unconquerable city. The psychological trauma across the globe was unimaginable. St. Jerome, who was living in Bethlehem at the time, actually wrote that when the news reached him, his voice literally faltered. Yeah, he was choking on his own sobs. He was just unable to comprehend that the city which had captured the whole world was now a captive itself.
It must have felt like gravity had suddenly just stopped working.
That is the perfect way to describe it. The fundamental laws of their reality were suspended. And in the immediate aftermath of that trauma, human nature did what human nature always does.
It panicked.
It panicked and it looked for a scapegoat. The pagans remaining in the empire immediately pointed their fingers at the relatively new official religion, which is Christianity.
Right.
Their logic was actually incredibly straightforward. They said, look, Rome grew into a global superpower under the protection of the old pagan gods. Now the empire has adopted Christianity, the old sacrifices are prohibited, and the old gods have abandoned us.
So they thought the new religion was the literal cause of the ruin.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this because blaming Christianity for the fall of Rome is like blaming a sudden massive heart attack on the garden salad you ate yesterday.
That's a great analogy.
Right. While completely ignoring, 40 years of chain smoking and terrible habits, you can't just point to the absolute newest variable in the ecosystem and ignore decades of chronic systemic disease.
And Augustine saw that exact logical fallacy. I mean, he was a brilliant philosopher and a bishop, and he wrote this massive 22-book masterpiece to counter that specific narrative.
It's a huge undertaking.
It really is. But before he even gets to his own positive theology, he knows he has to dismantle the comfortable myths the Romans were telling themselves. He has to rip away this illusion of the good old days.
Which is a bold move. I mean, how do you convince a grieving, angry population that the golden era they're crying over was actually rotten?
Use their own heroes against them.
Yeah.
Augustine actually bypasses scripture entirely in this section and goes straight to Sallust and Cicero.
Oh, wow. The heavy hitters.
Right, the most revered historians and literary giants of Rome. He pulls their own historical records to prove that the Roman Republic was morally bankrupt long before Christ was even born.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, he brings out texts where Sallust describes the youth of Rome being swept away by luxury and avarice like a torrential flood.
So the decay was already documented by their own guys.
Exactly. He quotes Cicero, who lived well before the Christian era, describing the Republic as a faded painting that had entirely lost its original colors.
A faded painting. That's a powerful image.
Cicero flat out admitted that they retained the name of a republic, but had already lost the reality of it through their own internal vices.
So the structural integrity was just gone.
Yeah.
And if the republic was already rotting, it leaves a glaring question. Where were their gods? I
Right.
mean, wasn't the whole point of the Roman religion to keep the society on track?
That is exactly the pressure point Augustine pushes. He asks the pagans, where were your gods when the moral fabric of the city was tearing apart?
Yeah, what were they doing?
Why didn't Jupiter or Mars issue any laws to guide their worshippers toward a virtuous life? The pagan gods demanded endless bloody sacrifices, but they never demanded good character. They didn't care about the internal state of the citizen at all.
Looking through the notes, there is this incredibly ironic detail about the Trojan gods that absolutely blew my mind.
Oh, the Troy connection. Yeah.
Right, the Romans trace their lineage back to Troy, right, and they worship the gods of Troy. But Augustine points out that those exact same gods couldn't protect Troy from the Greeks.
Yep. Troy was burned to ashes.
He quotes Virgil, showing the Trojan priest dragging his conquered gods away from the burning city. It raises this hilarious and honestly devastating point. Why on earth did the Romans trust conquered gods to protect Rome?
It makes no sense when you really think about it.
Exactly. They entrusted the defense of their empire to guardians who literally couldn't even defend themselves.
It just totally exposes the sheer absurdity of their historical narrative. And Augustine doesn't stop there. He highlights a vital detail about the actual sack of Rome in 410 AD that completely flips the script.
Okay, what happened?
When Alaric and the Goths sacked the city, they did something truly unprecedented. They spared anyone, Christian or pagan, who fled into the Christian churches.
Wait, really? The invading army just stopped?
Yes, the massive basilicas of the apostles became impenetrable sanctuaries.
But that seems totally counterintuitive for ancient warfare. Weren't temples usually the ultimate prize for a conquering army? I mean, that's where the wealth was?
Universally. Julius Caesar himself documented that the standard custom of war involved plundering the temples and dragging people away from the altars.
Right.
During the fall of Troy, King Priam was slaughtered right on the altar of his own gods. The sanctuary of Juno was used as a holding pen for captives and a storage unit for looted treasure.
So it was usually a bloodbath.
A complete bloodbath. But in Rome, these bloodthirsty barbarian Goths, who had actually converted to a form of Christianity themselves, halted their swords at the thresholds of the churches.
That is wild.
The very pagans who were spending their surviving days insulting Christ only survived the sack because they ran and hid in his sanctuaries. Augustine totally calls them out on this profound ingratitude.
I mean, they owe their breath to the very institution they are trying to blame for the collapse.
Oh.
So if abandoning the old gods wasn't the wrecking ball, what actually caused the collapse?
To answer that, Augustine shifts the focus from external threats to internal psychology. He looks closely at the societal mechanisms of fear and prosperity.
Okay.
And he brings in this fascinating historical debate regarding the destruction of Carthage. Now, Carthage was Rome's great rival across the Mediterranean.
Right, the Punic Wars and all that.
Exactly. But a prominent Roman leader, Scipio Nasica, strongly opposed destroying Carthage.
See, my instinct would be to crush my biggest rival so my country could finally relax. Why did Scipio see that relaxation as a threat?
Because Scipio understood human sociology on a really profound level. He knew that a shared, terrifying external threat acted as a societal glue.
Ah, so it kept everyone in line.
Right. The fear of Carthage kept the Roman citizens unified. It acted as a psychological pressure valve that curbed their worst, most selfish impulses.
That makes a lot of sense.
Scipio argued that if Carthage was destroyed and Rome had absolutely no one left to fear, the resulting absolute security and massive wealth would breed a toxic cocktail of unchecked luxury and what Augustine calls the libido dominandi.
The lust for domination.
Yes, the lust of rule.
And without an external enemy to dominate, that lust just turns inward.
Exactly. And history proved Scipio tragically right. Once Carthage fell and the fear was removed, the internal concord of Rome just shattered.
The pressure valve was gone.
Completely gone. The dopamine hit of constant expansion turned into horrific civil wars, political backstabbing, and utter moral profligacy. The society basically consumed itself because it couldn't handle its own prosperity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Reading about how they handled this prosperity, it feels eerily familiar to today.
How so?
Well, Augustine points specifically to the cultural inputs, like the entertainment. He notes that the pagan gods demanded to be worshipped through these incredibly obscene, degrading theatrical plays and games.
Yeah, the gladiatorial games and the theater.
Right. He talks about spectacles so filthy that decent people would be ashamed to even describe them. And thinking about it, It's the attention economy, isn't it?
Oh, that's an interesting connection.
Yeah, the Romans were essentially being algorithmically fed outrage and degradation just like we are.
That is a phenomenal parallel. Break down how you see that mechanism working both then and now.
Well, just as the Roman games demanded mindless, degrading entertainment that slowly bypassed the intellect and rotted the culture's spiritual gut, our modern digital ecosystem often does the exact same thing.
It really does.
Algorithms prioritize the most sensational, outrage-inducing content because it captures attention. It feeds our base instincts.
We just can't look away.
Exactly. We are sitting there scrolling, getting these little hits of tribal dopamine, while the actual foundations of our society, our trusted institutions, and our community bonds crumble around us. We're entertaining ourselves into oblivion.
And that is precisely how Augustine says a civilization falls. He argues that the evil spirits, these demons posing as pagan gods, didn't need to physically storm the walls of Rome to destroy the empire.
Because they were already inside.
Right. They had already stormed and sacked the morality of the citizens through these toxic cultural inputs.
Wow.
By convincing the Romans to celebrate cruelty, lust, and impurity as divine worship, the internal compass of the people was completely destroyed. Once the morality is sacked, the physical walls of the city are entirely irrelevant. They will eventually fall on their own.
That is just, wow. So if Rome was rotting from the inside, and these foundational structures were essentially designed to self-destruct, it leaves us with a huge question. What does a society built on the right foundation actually look like?
That is the big question.
How do we build something that doesn't inevitably rot?
This is where Augustine transitions from diagnosing the disease to offering his grand framework for understanding all of human history and all human institutions. He introduces the concept of the two cities.
Okay, the two cities.
He divides all of humanity into two invisible, overlapping communities: the city of the world, or the earthly city, and the city of God.
And these aren't physical places with borders and passports, right?
No, not at all. They are psychological and spiritual realities defined by what their citizens love.
Okay, break that down for me.
So, the city of the world is driven by the love of self, reaching even to the contempt of God. It's defined by pride, self-aggrandizement, and that libido dominandi we mentioned earlier, the lust for domination.
And the other one.
The city of God, conversely, is driven by the love of God, reaching even to the contempt of self. It is characterized by humility, mutual service, and true justice.
You know, that concept of the lust for domination is wild when you really look at how the city of the world functions.
It really is.
Because if everyone in a society is fundamentally driven by a desire to dominate everyone else, it creates a fragile zero-sum game. It's mathematically doomed.
Exactly. It eats itself.
There is a story Augustine shares in the text that perfectly captures the pure audacity of this system. It's about Alexander the Great and a captured pirate.
I love this story.
It's so good. Alexander has this pirate brought before him in chains and demands to know what gives him the right to keep hostile possession of the sea.
Right. How dare you steal on my ocean?
Exactly. And the pirate just looks right at the emperor and boldly replies, "What thou meanest by seizing the whole earth, but because I do it with a petty ship, I am called a robber, whilst thou who dost it with a great fleet art styled emperor."
It is one of the greatest ideological mic drops in ancient literature.
He just totally called him out.
He did. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Augustine uses it to make a radical, almost dangerous political statement.
Well, this is a statement.
He is arguing that without true justice, which he believes can only exist where God is truly worshipped, earthly kingdoms are nothing more than large-scale robbery syndicates.
So just massive pirate gangs.
Essentially, yes. Think about the mechanism of the state. If true justice isn't the foundation, then the law is just violence with a better PR team.
Wow. Violence with a better PR team.
What is the difference between a pirate gang and an empire? The only difference is scale and the impunity that comes with scale. The earthly city is structurally doomed because it is built on this desperate desire for human praise and domination.
But wait, I have to push back here. Didn't the early Romans have incredible virtues? We always hear about their courage, their frugality, their extreme loyalty to the state.
They definitely had those qualities, yes.
They built aqueducts, they established laws. That doesn't sound like a mere pirate gang.
It's a great point, and Augustine actually spends a lot of time addressing it. He admits the early Romans accomplished massively impressive things, but he introduces this brilliant psychological concept. He argues their virtues were ultimately just lesser vices.
What does that mean? How could a virtue be a vice?
Think about the mechanics of human motivation. The early Romans suppressed their greed for money, and they suppressed their desire for physical pleasure and luxury.
Right, the Stoic ideal.
But why did they suppress them?
Mm.
Not out of true humility or love for justice, but because they had a massive, overwhelming greed for human glory.
Oh, I see.
They wanted to be immortalized in statues and epic poems. So they weren't truly virtuous in a pure sense. They just traded a socially destructive vice like laziness or petty theft for a more socially productive vice, which is massive societal pride.
Ah, okay, so their pride is what built the aqueducts and won the war.
Precisely. It acted as a temporary societal glue. But here is the fatal flaw. Because that entire system was built on human pride and the endless pursuit of glory, it could never last.
That's a built-in expiration date.
Exactly. Eventually, when there are no more foreign enemies to conquer for glory, that pride turns inward and the citizens start trying to dominate each other. The lesser vice inevitably mutates back into the destructive disease.
Okay, this brings up a glaring question.
Yeah.
If you are listening to this right now, you might be thinking, so what does this all mean? If you are a good person,
Right.
if the earthly city is fundamentally doomed to collapse because of its own baked-in corruption, why do the good people have to suffer right alongside the wicked when the wrecking ball finally swings?
That's a very fair question.
If you are a good person, trying your best to live humbly, maybe quietly operating in the city of God, but your house gets burned down by the Goths anyway, what's the difference? Why doesn't God just spare the good?
Augustine anticipates this exact objection. It's the classic problem of pain. And he offers one of the most haunting and beautiful analogies to explain the mechanics of suffering.
Okay, let's hear it.
He says, imagine a blazing furnace. In the exact same fire, gold glows brightly and is purified of its dross, but chaff, the useless waste of the wheat crop, just smokes and burns away into nothing.
So the fire is the same, but the reaction is different.
Right. Or think of an agricultural threshing floor. Under the exact same heavy, crushing flail, the useless straw is shattered, but the good grain is cleansed and separated.
Wow.
Or an olive press. Under the exact same intense physical pressure, the bitter lees are separated, but the pure, valuable oil flows out.
So the external event, the actual suffering, is absolutely identical for everyone.
Yes. The physical suffering, the famine, the loss of property, the violence of war, the economic collapse, is identical for both the good and the bad. The physical inputs don't change.
Then what changes?
The difference lies entirely in the inner spiritual state of the person experiencing it. Augustine argues that the exact same pressure that causes mud to exhale a horrible stench causes a sweet ointment to emit a beautiful fragrance.
That is a profound way to look at it.
In the midst of calamity, the citizens of the earthly city curse their fate, they despair, and they blaspheme because they have lost the only things they ever loved, which is their worldly possessions and status.
Right, because that was their whole foundation.
Exactly. But the citizens of the city of God endures patiently, they pray, and they are spiritually purified by the trial, because their ultimate treasure was never in the burning city to begin with.
That completely reframes how we look at societal disaster. The collapse isn't necessarily a blind punishment, it's a crucible. It reveals what you actually love.
It does.
But Augustine doesn't let the good people off the hook entirely, does he? He points out a really challenging truth about their complicity in the collapse.
He issues a piercing critique here. Augustine says that the good are often justly subjected to these temporal disasters alongside the wicked because during the long years of prosperity and peace, they were cowardly.
Cowardly. How so?
They saw the moral decay happening around them, but they refused to speak out against it.
They saw the termites, but they didn't want to ruin the dinner party by pointing them out.
Exactly. And this raises an important question. Think about your own workplace or community. Have you ever noticed institutional rot but stayed quiet?
I think most people have at some point.
Augustine says the good citizens of Rome stayed silent because they didn't want to lose their social status, their wealth, or their comfortable friendships with people in power.
So they chose comfort over truth.
They didn't personally participate in the grossest sins, but they tolerated them in others because rocking the boat would have threatened their legitimate worldly comforts. They loved this present life a little too much.
They liked the stock market returns of a corrupt empire.
Wow, yes. Exactly. So when the collapse finally comes and God humbles the empire for its pride and luxury, the good suffer the loss of those exact earthly things they were too afraid to risk losing in the first place.
That is, wow. It hits hard.
Augustine's telling us that our silence makes us complicit in the architecture of decay. When the collapse comes, we share in the fallout because we shared in the silence that allowed the rot to spread.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, pulling back the curtain on one of history's greatest cataclysms.
We really have.
We started with the terrifying sack of Rome in 410 AD, a moment where the world seemed to literally be ending, and the panicked population pointed fingers at a new religion.
The easy scapegoat.
Right. But through Augustine's brilliant systematic takedown, we've seen that the script was entirely backward. Political collapse is merely the final, visible symptom of a terminal, long-standing spiritual disease.
The rot happens first.
Civilizations fall when they replace true justice with the endless lust for power. They fall when their foundations are built on human pride instead of divine truth. And they fall when their culture becomes utterly consumed by distracting, degrading spectacles that bypass the mind and rot the soul.
And crucially, we have to remember that the good old days are almost always a myth.
Oh, absolutely.
They are a comforting lie we tell ourselves to avoid dealing with the slow generational creep of our own societal failures. The city of the world is always unstable because a society organized around self-love and domination is, at its core, just a very successful pirate gang.
Just a pirate gang with a better PR team.
Exactly. And eventually, whether through external invasion or internal collapse, the bill always comes due.
So as you step back into your day, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Something to really think about.
Yeah. If Augustine is right that all earthly cities, all human institutions, and all political parties are fundamentally unstable because they are built on human pride and the fragile pursuit of glory, where are you anchoring your ultimate hope?
Where is your foundation?
In an era where algorithmic digital spectacles and intense political tribalism almost perfectly mirror the dying days of the Roman Republic, are you building your life in the fragile, temporary city of the world?
Or are you looking elsewhere?
Right. Or are you investing your time, your love, and your courage in the enduring, eternal values of the city of God? Because at the end of the day, you can't just worry about the wrecking ball swinging outside. You have to check your own foundation.
You really do.
Because if the foundation is built on pride and distraction, it's not a matter of if it will fall, but when.